Welcome to Play Like a Girl Live. My name is Judith Ingleson-Dobb, and I am a Play Like a Girl board member. Today's theme is Connect, and we have the legend herself, Christie Rampone, joining us from California for a one-on-one interview with our dear friend, Kelsey Trainer of New York City. But first, we have a few housekeeping items we'd like you to note. Please add your name to the screen. And turn on your video because we'd love to see your beautiful smiles. We'd also ask that you stay muted until you're invited to speak. We'd like to see your positive comments and questions added to the chat box. And also tag us on social media using @PlayLikeAGirl and also hashtag #IPlayLikeAGirl. And also thanks for joining us. Next week, we host our final installment of this month's Play Like a Girl live series leading up to International Day of the Girl, which we celebrate on October 11th. To show our appreciation, we will be announcing a giveaway later in the program. Before we get started, I'd love for you to hear directly from one of our very special participants. Welcome Harper, who we know will inspire you with her Play Like a Girl story. Harper?
Hi.
Speak up.
Hi. I've been with Play Like a Girl for over 2 years. I like Play Like a Girl because I get to meet women with cool jobs and how STEM relates to everything. One of my favorite Play Like a Girl events is the one where we went to the Nashville Sounds baseball stadium and we practiced softball, and I like that one because I play softball as well. And yeah.
Oh, well, thanks for sharing that with us, Harper. And if you want to help us inspire more girls like Harper and unlock limitless potential for the next generation, you can act now. Giving is easy. Text "I Play Like a Girl" to 44321. And thank you again for joining us today. And now I'd like to introduce our moderator for today's session, Kelsey Trainer.
Thank you so much, Judith, and thank you, Harper, and thank you everyone for joining us today. My name is Kelsey Trainer. I am a lawyer in the TV and film industry in New York City, originally from the Philadelphia area. I also write about sports for a number of different publications. I host a podcast, Calling Game, where guests like Rebecca Lobo, Jay Billis, and fellow U.S. Women's National Team great Christine Lilly help me call game on the media's gender bias in sports. And I'm an advocate for equality in the women's sports space, which is how I became associated with Play Like a Girl in this wonderful organization. So thank you everyone for joining. As we navigate this pandemic, I know that it's more important now than ever to have a support system that empowers, inspires, and connects girls and women as a community. So just know that your voice matters and you are a valuable part of that community. And we are so happy to have you here today. So I'm gonna jump right in to today's session with Christie Rampone, the all-time great US Women's National Team captain, who in her career played in 19 total Women's World Cup matches, tied for 6th best all time, and played in 22 Olympic matches, more than any US player. During her career, she was rarely out of the starting lineup for the next 19 years. She started 272 of her 311 caps. She played 24,011 minutes, insane, in the US uniform, second most in US history. Her 311 caps are the second highest total in the history of international soccer, men or women, second only to, again, Christine Lilly. And so with all of her success on the field, she also gave birth to 2 beautiful daughters while she was playing. After hanging up her cleats, Christie did not stop paving the way and inspiring young women and girls. Her most recent endeavor is teaming up with clinical and sports neuropsychologist, brain health expert, and fellow sports mom, Dr. Christine Keene, to share practical, real-world advice on how to handle the pressures felt by youth, athletes, parents, and coaches today, and to provide kids with their best shot at reaching their goals and dreams in her new book, Be All In, Raising Kids for Success in Sports and Life. Christie, welcome to Play Like a Girl Live Connect. We are so excited to learn from you over the next hour. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Kelsey. What an intro. Appreciate it.
Yeah. I had to take some of the accomplishments out. It's just, I would have been here all day. So to start out, how are you doing? I mean, how are you hanging in there with everything going on?
Yeah, so far so good. I would say in the beginning it was definitely tough. Our whole routine was changed, and trying to stay positive through all this because I have two daughters, one in elementary school and now one in high school. So doing the virtual learning at home as well as trying to figure out what youth sports is looking like right now. As a coach on the field a lot in the afternoons, we toned it down and just made sure we stayed connected and did a lot of Zoom calls. And now we're slowly opening back up and just training. We're not competing in games yet, but we're just training. So just trying to figure out our new normal and just trying to find our new routine as well.
I was going to ask if you've been able to kind of get out and be active in the past few months. I know the weather's been pretty decent depending on where you are. So how about that?
I'm trying to stay active. I have two energetic dogs that keep me going. It's the everyday expectation of walking them, and we get 7 to 9 miles a day. So I'm staying fit and trying to stay healthy because I think it's really important to stay healthy right now. And one of the, exercises is crucial for the mental health right now. So that's keeping me out there moving, whether rain, cold, I'm out there trying to stay fit for my kids.
I mean, the question that a lot of the people want to know is there any TVs, movies, or sports that you've been kind of tuning into during the pandemic? I mean, that's a big question right now.
Yeah, obviously the NWSL.
Yes.
Followed the whole Challenge Cup. Don't miss a game. I thought they did an incredible job of just staying committed to the sport and themselves, of being able to handle being in a bubble. It's not easy when you're in your own room, you're eating in the same facility every time. Just you see the field in your hotel room, but I give them credit for following the guidelines and just respecting each other so that they can play the sport they love. And it's not easy. I don't think a lot of people realize what they see on TV is a different picture from the preparation and the development to get there. And now, in their fall series, they're heading back, and now I'm tuning into a lot of the games overseas because a lot of our players have shifted over, and watching some Man City games, and now Manchester United with Tobin and Christie Pearce going over. So it's exciting to see the girls branch out and learn some new skill sets in different countries.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. It looks like overseas, I mean, the NWSL and there's just so much great soccer right now. And it's not maybe something that we expected in this pandemic, but it does seem like the women's sports are, or especially soccer, are just really doing well right now.
I agree. The product in the field is amazing, and it just shows the love that women have for the game and the passion they have behind the game, and they're truly disciplined and committed to growing and getting better. And that's why you're seeing these players go overseas to work on their weaknesses, being, it's an uncomfortable environment, you're getting challenged each and every day, and that's what's going to make them better heading into the Olympics. They need games, they need touches on the ball and minutes, and they can get it over there in England.
All right, well, that's going to be a great segue into a lot of the stuff we're going to talk about your book as well. But I think we're going to slide into a little poll question here. I think there's a poll that's going to pop up on people's screens. Question 1 is, how have sports benefited you the most? So if everyone can kind of take a second to vote, and we can get the answers and talk about that in a second. Got my vote in. Not telling, I'll tell after. Let's see, it should pop up or something right here. Well, but before here we go. Okay, just as I suspected. The top result is teamwork. I mean, obviously, a ton about teamwork, being on some epic teams. So what has teamwork in sports taught you to be everything that you're doing now, a mom, an author? I mean, what has it given to you?
Yeah, I think being on a team sport, you really embrace the relationships you build, not only with your teammates, but the staff and the people behind the scenes and everything that everybody puts into it. And I think you value your teammates' strengths and you embrace their weaknesses and realize that there's no one size fits all way to success, and everybody is different. Everybody has different personalities, but how can you blend and become one to be the strongest unit? And I think that relates really into life as well, as being able to work with others and understand that some of your teammates are just having a bad day, and that's okay. And trying to help them and support them through it. But, being able to rely on each other and help build confidence, and someone's lacking confidence, to be there for them, to support them through, the good and the bad and the ugly.
It's interesting that you say that, and that teamwork is obviously the top answer. When I was interviewing for law school, the dean literally said to me that he loves every single student that comes in that was an athlete, because sports obviously teaches you so much about winning and losing and how to work with different people. How do you think that you would be today without having had sport and played it?
That's a great question. I lacked a lot of confidence growing up, to be honest, and I really found myself through sport. I really embraced the feeling on the field and being around and being supported with my teammates. I struggled with my confidence off the field. I didn't really use my voice as much as I probably should have. I was shy, quiet, and I think I slowly got, better and better at using my voice and being confident away from my peers, I guess, and my friends. So I think sports allowed me to slowly develop that. And it was a process. And I learned that, you just can't expect greatness overnight, and my voice does matter. And the more I used it, the more the people listened, and that it was a challenge for me, to be honest. The fear of failure and the fear of the unknown, I think, kept me more quiet and shy, and I lacked that confidence. So sports along the way helped me to develop. And, in the end of the day, I became captain of the best team in the world, but it didn't happen overnight, put it that way. It was a process of slowly building confidence from within and believing in myself and kind of changing that inner voice to always, changing that negative thought to something positive.
Now, do you see that in your girls? Do you see that they have that self-confidence from the start, or is it sport building that for them?
Sport is building. I have one that has a lot of confidence, and I have one that lacks confidence. So very different personalities. The way that they handle pressure, the way that they handle sports. I have one that's at a competitive level that really is into it. And my younger daughter is very just about having fun. We're on a recreational level. There's no pressures. She just goes out, has fun. I'm coaching both, so I get to see the different, see it through a different lens, and just enjoying it through them. So I think it's more about having self-awareness of each individual child, and their relationship with sports maybe doesn't compare to my relationship with sports, but I'm excited for both of them and what they can do on the field, court, in the dance. My youngest loves to dance, and it's
great.
So it's just embracing their dreams and goals.
All right, we're gonna dive into all of that a bit more in a little bit, but I think we're gonna head on to the second poll question, which is, what is the greatest difficulty helping girls recover after a loss? Ooh, okay, this is a good one. Submitted my answer here. This is a really good question, so I'm really interested to see what people say in this one. All right, it should come up in a second here. Here we go. Oh, pretty close, actually. It seems pretty even. So if you don't mind telling me, what was your answer to this one?
I put realistic comeback expectations, because I think sometimes at the younger age, at the youth age, they don't really understand kind of what the expectation is unless you have that conversation with your child, and understanding it's not always about the winning piece. It's about learning and developing. And, with both of my children, I always talk about having that growth mindset of being able to learn and adapt and adjust and want to, because that's the big piece of it. You have to want to be able to grow and learn. And that's something that comes from within. Like I can tell you as a mother, what's right from wrong or how to make better choices, but they in the end have to make those decisions, and it's trying to help them along. And sometimes they're not ready to listen.
That's interesting. So it looks like obviously the number one answer was harsh coaches. I know that can be rough. Why do you think that so many people put that answer, and the best way to deal with it?
I think the harsh coaching comes with like not trusting the process, and not understanding completely where you're putting your child into and what environment you're putting them into. So that comes with a lot of communication, knowing like, am I putting my child into an environment where it's you earn your playing time, or is it a rotation of playing time? And if you don't fully understand the expectations, I think you as a parent are gonna struggle with that. And then you in turn, the emotion comes into, I think, a little bit more of the harsh coaching. But if you know it's about earning your playing time, and that hopefully coaches are setting up your child for success, and some of that harsh coaching may lack playing time because of how they showed up throughout the week in practice. Maybe they're hopefully teaching them a lesson. However, yelling and screaming and raising your voice is something that hopefully coaches will slowly back away from, and understand that their true emotion is they're there to help the kids get better.
It's a good answer. And I made a note to talk about the chapter entitled "The Car Ride Home." So I think that's we'll get into that more, but that was my favorite chapter. All right. So that was awesome. Thank you everyone for for participating there. And I think we're just going to kind of jump right into some more questions here. All right. So you finished your soccer career as U.S. Women's National Team only 4-time Olympian. Okay. Specifically Olympic gold medals in 2004, 2008, 2012. Olympic silver medal. We'll put that, to the side. It's too much greatness there. You're the 8th woman in U.S. history with 2 World Cup titles in your resume. I mean, just like, this is such a basic question, but I mean, how does it feel right now in 2020 to look back at that career? It's insane.
It's crazy. I mean, finally digesting it all, to be honest, because when you're in the moment, like you just go from the next to the next, and like you finish an Olympics and you're ready for the next 4 years of preparing and getting ready. So you don't really have that time to really embrace what you just earned. So now I'm just like reflecting back and realizing like the commitment and the hours and the passion I put in behind playing, and just the relationships I built along the way, and the friendships that you build, and what sports really gave back to me. I think that's what we forget to look at, is like we're just constantly going for, trying to better ourselves, but really sports gave so much back to me, and that's what I appreciate probably the most.
And I know, obviously, being on so many epic teams, you had some epic teammates as well. Some of them I've had the pleasure to get to talk to a few times. What is that like, being in that environment with, I think I listened to an interview somewhere else. You were talking about you're just with a bunch of competitive, fierce women. I mean, what's that like? I mean, it must be insane.
It's amazing, to be honest, to be able to like show up every day and compete with the best players in the world and have them make me better. I always say, like, as a defender, thinking back to all my teammates, the reason I was as good as I was and had a long career is because I went up against the Mia Hamms and Michelle Akers and Tiffany Milbert, Shannon McMillan.
Right.
The next round of it was like Abby Wambach and Sid LaRue and Alex. And
kept coming.
It's like, it's kept coming. All different personalities, all different styles. So to be able to play and practice, we always said our practices were so much harder than our games. They all prepared me to be the best I could against a Marta and players of that ability. So it was pretty unbelievable and amazing just to kind of just battle each and every day, but then respect each other. I'll never forget my first experience as a defender of just battling with Brandy Chastain. And then I was like, oh, she's gonna hate me after this. Like, we got into it, but she was like, that was awesome, way to compete. And I was just like, okay, everybody's here for the right reasons and the same goals, to make each other better and make this the best team in the world. And to do that, you have to compete and put yourself under pressure in a game-like scenario every time you step on the field.
I think that's something that, especially young girls, I think when you get to the stage where you realize you can compete against people, and that they competing makes you better, and then you can walk off the field and have that respect for each other. That's the growth that I think a lot of young girls should aspire to get to, because it's hard. I mean, you're growing up, it's so competitive, and it's really tough with everything else, going on growing up as a young kid. I think that's the space where kids get the most growth.
I'll say, like, when I'm coaching my youth athletes, a lot of times I can see, they're great in practice and then they get nervous in games. We talk about that performance anxiety, and I'm trying to instill in them, if you practice like you want to play, it lessens that anxiety on game day, because you're used to the speed of play, you're used to, like, the fitness of the game as you get older, and the decision making. So I'm trying to instill, like, practice like you play, and the more times you put yourself in pressure situations, the easier it gets. And they're starting to slowly understand that, but that is also a process to get to that point.
That's awesome. And you made a really good point about kind of practicing harder than you play. I mean, I spent a wee bit of time coaching college basketball, obviously not at the level that you're at, but I mean, that's the end goal. And I guess it hit me, like, that's when I realized that I could have been a better athlete had I done those things. And clearly, that hit you at a young age.
You realize game day is for entertaining, right? Game day is to be creative. Game day is to have fun. And then you're going to make mistakes. We say sports are made up of mistakes, so don't be so hard on yourself. And then practice is to get better and to reflect back on those mistakes and work on them and be aware of them. But game day is supposed to be fun, enjoyable, like, put on a show, entertain, have fun. And then when you can separate that as an athlete and understand that, it makes it so much more enjoyable.
I want to ask you a question, because you obviously look back at your storied career and, everything is success, right? Success. But it's my opinion that the biggest lessons come from failures. So I'd love to kind of get your take on your biggest failure in your mind, and what that taught you going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest failure for me was when I first joined the national team. I failed fitness miserably. I actually got lapped. I really didn't know what I was doing. I was just like, I'm going to give out my strength. I'm fast. I'm going to go after it. I had no idea what we were doing. Kind of went too fast, too soon, and died out. And I'll never forget that feeling of, like, such disappointment and lack of preparation. Because in the end, like, at the beginning, it was like crawl into a hole. I just want to get on the airplane, go home. And I realized I had to face that, like, disappointment in myself, but then understand I really wasn't prepared to, step into that battle. And, it was almost set up to fail. And so, I went home, but it took me, like, years to get over the fact that fitness was just a test to help individually get better. And I was just like, I don't want to fail in front of my peers. I don't want to, look like that again. So it took a long time to overcome. But once I got that feeling, that's why I try to help reflect to the youth athletes, because I'm like, it's just one moment. Don't let it define you. Like, you can overcome it, like, change that mindset, because I was, like, in a dark place because I'm like, I really want to be here, but, can I do this? And that self-belief, but, that's your own voice, and that's something, I talk to my athletes about. It's like, you're in control of it, but you don't realize that sometimes when you're in your younger years and you're losing, or you're put in a place where you're uncomfortable, and that fear of, like, you don't want to make a mistake or fail in front of others, but, like, that's all part of growth. That's all part of learning. And if you don't fail, I think it's even harder to succeed, because you don't know how to adapt and adjust to those difficult moments within a game, or difficult conversations you may have to have with a coach, a teammate. The more you can do that at the younger years, the easier it gets as you get older.
And I imagine that has led you into, you made a pretty big job change when you decided to hang up your cleats and do broadcast work for Fox Sports and coverage of the U.S. Women's National Team. I imagine you've had to put in a lot of preparation and prep work to do that, just because it's different from what you've done.
Absolutely. I was, like, honestly petrified, like, the one thing I do know is I know the game of soccer. However, I didn't know the world of soccer. I knew the U.S. players. I was in my own little bubble, playing, loving it for the last, 20 years, retire. And now I got to know the names of every player in the world. And it was actually fun to just study the styles and know everybody's name and the stories behind all the individual players. So maybe even embrace and enjoy the women's game even more.
That's daunting. The task is daunting. Was the transition, I mean, did you find it difficult in terms of, you know, it's hard for athletes to leave sport, right? Did you find it difficult, or did the fact that you were kind of still in soccer help you?
I think it helped, but you kind of lose your identity a little bit, you know, because I'm someone that just pushes through, perseveres, works harder, you know, to figure it out. And now I was in a place where I couldn't, you know, get any fitter. I couldn't work through it. So now it was, you know, in studio, it was more like I'm studying, I have it all, but it's like you have 30 seconds to get your message off. And then sometimes it's like in your ear, it's like, now you have 15. Okay, now you have 5 because I talked a little bit too much. So I think it was like just adapting and adjusting. Like I've learned my whole life. I was like, it was game time. Like when you go live, it was like just like being in time. Like, you know, just say what's on your mind, get it out there, and you know, just work with your group. And that was what was kind of cool too. Is that, you know, on the show that I was on, I was with 3 other athletes, and it was just nice to bounce the ideas. And I felt like, okay, I need the support from you guys to make myself feel a little bit more comfortable. But it was a lot of work. It was a lot of, you know, it was a lot of studying, a lot of work, but just another chapter for me just to figure out. And I embraced it, and I'm not gonna say I loved it, but it's a work in progress.
Right. It's that living in your uncomfortable zone. That's where you grow. And I imagine did you watch any film back of any clips that you did or stuff like that, right?
You watch your body language, you watch, like, you know, my tone, you know, did I look excited? Did I look nervous? How was my rapport with my co-host? You know, so that was, you know, all the stuff that you have to do. You know, it's like in anything, the more you do it, the better you'll get. And I was just, you know, thrown out for the first time, like in a big tournament. You know, everyone's watching the World Cup, so I embraced it, had fun with it, and, you know, I'd love to do more, but it's hard because obviously sports being interrupted right now, and lack of commentating and lack of games, you're really not in front of camera as much as I'd like to be, to try to continue to prepare myself to be better at it.
So I'm not a mom. I do have a pretty epic mom, but I can't speak to what it's like to have a child in the middle of your career, and in a career that is very physically demanding, and that had to be difficult, right?
It was tough. You know, I think I mentally prepared myself for like trying to get through it together. And if it didn't work, you know, I would retire because I wanted to put my kids first. However, like, they were great. They started on the road with me after 3 months, and
Great.
They adjusted and adapt, but like, what better to grow up with these amazing aunts and great role models, and that
is like a girl gang. Yeah. I mean, that's an epic girl gang.
Yeah. And it shows too, like, being around independent females that have like high aspirations and goals. Like, my girls are so strong-minded and independent and believe in themselves because they got to witness it every day in front of them. And they saw the ups and downs, they saw success, they saw defeat, but they observed it all. You know, like, kids are sponges, and I think they just listened, and, you know, it's just fun to watch them understand what they experienced and use it into their life now.
That's awesome. I'm sure they are just amazing young girls. It's awesome. So I want to get into your book now because, you know, I think it's a pretty amazing thing to say that you're an author. What an accomplishment. So BLN, Raising Kids for Success in Sports and Life, is a blend of, it's like neuroscience, parenting strategies, and wisdom, obviously gleaned from your extraordinary experiences as a world-class athlete. It explains how to get the most out of youth sports and turn those lessons into lifelong skills. Obviously, that's what we're about here at Play Like a Girl. The mission is to level the playing field by leveraging the skills you use in sport and to propel you into competitive, male-dominated careers in STEM. So just to start, I mean, why, in your opinion, is it so important for young girls to stay in sports?
I think it's huge, just mentally and physically. You know, the combination of both. I think it's great for girls to be involved in sports and team sports and be around, other girls and, work together and find their leadership skills, find their communication skills. As they get older, you learn a little bit more about responsibility and what accountability means. So there are just so many life lessons that prepare you in the long run, and the pressures that we face through sports, and the ups and downs. And I would say it's an emotional roller coaster for a complete family, and the journey through sports is exciting, and it should be. And that's why I wanted to give back and write this book, from the beginning of my experience through youth sports all the way to the final days of retiring and now coaching.
And can you kind of talk about, how the book came to be? Because it's so interesting to see and read the, the wisdom and the stories, but also with the science part of it. Obviously, I was like mind blown.
Yeah. So it all started because Dr. Keen and I have done some speaking engagements together, and we realized the climate of sports was heading in the wrong direction. There was so much anxiety and pressure on kids, and we wanted to bring the love back of the game through, our experiences. Dr. Keen on the clinical side, as well as my experience of playing, coaching, and we're both mothers, and just trying to take it all in and educate a little bit of the parents and the coaches on, like, sports can be so rewarding as long as you're aware of your emotions throughout the journey, and to make sure that you are putting in your children in sports for the right reasons, and teaching them the lessons they can learn just other than just winning. We always say, like, winning is a byproduct of developing, and we need to develop in order to get to that winning piece and that success. And if we don't, and we get lost in that shuffle and it's just about winning, we're really not teaching our children, how to succeed for the next chapter in their life.
I need you to write that quote down. I love it. The winning is that the developing. I love that. I'm gonna have to get that for you after. So this is a question. Where's the book title come from? Why Be All In? What does that mean to you?
So Be All In to me is always being present in everything you do. I noticed there's so many distractions in the world today that when you're on the soccer field, be all in. Like, when you're in school, be present, be all in. When you're with your family, and like, try to be present in that moment and give everything that you have, because you're missing out if you were half in and half out. And I learned that a lot through being a mom and playing, soccer at the highest level. I had to have a balance. And throughout a lot of my speaking engagements, I always use the term be all in, and everybody seemed to grasp it and love the fact that it's not meaning like, be all in, you got to be the most amazing soccer player or basketball player. It just truly means, like, just be present. When you go to watch your child play as well, be present. Let them notice that you're there for them and not on your phone the entire game. Kids definitely are looking up and they digest everything. So overall, like, being in it for the right reasons.
Do you see that, or do you think that parents of young athletes are not naturally all in? Is that something that, researching for the book that you found, or is it a little bit of both?
A little bit of both. I think there's some parents that are too involved and too all in, where they're pushing their own interests on their children instead of having their child, have their own interests and write their own script. And then there's the parents that really aren't invested in being that partner in the journey with their child. They're just there to, drive them, drop them off, and, like, there's no rapport maybe along the way of what the child's final outcome goal is. What's their big picture? Like, why do they want to play sports? And, having those great conversations with your kids, you can learn so much together through sport, and it just opens up a great conversation.
That's going to lead me into the favorite part of the book, which was the chapter titled The Car Ride Home. And I think it even says there that every player, or every athlete, no matter if you were, just in a rec league as a kid, or obviously, a world-class athlete like yourself, everyone can relate to that, positively or negatively. Right. Talk a little bit about the car ride home.
Yeah, Car Ride Home is about encompassing all the emotion of the game, and we try to help parents and coaches and kids realize, like, it's the car ride home should be the time to heal from the fields, right? Because there's so much going on at that moment, and your child could be in that fight versus flight mode of like they don't want to hear it, and if you start talking about it or saying, hey, what did the coach say, and why did you make this decision, and you start going at your child, they're gonna resent, maybe the sport and like start having a bad relationship with you, maybe feeling that they're not good enough, right? And they're questioning, are they the player that their parent wants them to be? So I think the car ride home is, as I call it, transitional moment. If we know in sports, it's like that ride home, let your child get their emotion out. If they want to be negative, if they want to cry, if they want to be happy, like let them talk. You're there to listen. And then I think if you can communicate like, okay, in our next stop, whether that's home, whether that's getting something to eat, we're done. Like we have to move on and let that emotion kind of stay in the car and then revisit it later, and revisit why it was so emotional and what were the takeaways from that game, and try to then have a more constructive conversation later on, because you can't have a conversation when there's too much emotion on both sides.
And I know that, every kid obviously reacts differently to a win-loss. I didn't want to talk to anybody after I lost a game, and my mom would just be kind of jabbering away. And I would just be so mad because I was so competitive, and I was just like, please, no talking. Whereas other kids are just ready to, go, hey, we going to friendlies? What's next, And so it's interesting. I noted that fight or flight. So it's interesting to hear the science behind it, that is something that kids deal with, post game, post a sporting event. But then you also in the book talk about a disagreement you had with a U.S. Women's National Team teammate, and how that ended up being resolved. And part of that was obviously communication between the two of you. But first, as a player of yourself, thinking back, what was the hardest part for you in the car ride home?
I think for me as a player is like, I think my own self-criticism, it's like you start playing the game in your head and like maybe things I could have done differently or why I did certain things. And you really focus in on all your mistakes and you forget about all those great moments. So if I could have gone back in time and, now knowing what I know now as an adult, back in those days, not been so hard on myself, and realizing that like it's all part of the game. And like I did have some good moments and stop like making it like almost like focusing just on that maybe one negative moment within the game. And I think if I voiced that a little bit more with my parents, maybe they could have helped me, like in a latter part of like, after the 24-hour rules off, and I, tell my parents like I need a little bit more positive affirmation like after a game, or give me those moments where I did do good so I can like swallow that so I'm not always focusing on the negative. I think that would help. But again, some children don't know how to verbalize what they're feeling. And as a parent, I know with my two daughters, body language is so critical. It tells you the story as a parent, and like if you really sit back and watch, like you really know what's going on. But if you get so caught up in everything in the game, you may miss it. But
so because you were such a competitive athlete, and because you had that mentality on your car ride home, how are you now as a mother to your girls on the car ride home?
Yeah, no soccer talk in the car, especially when you're the coach, because the first thing your daughter wants to say is like, did I play well and who didn't play well? I'm like, we don't talk about any other players. We're not talking about the game. Like, we'll talk later, because I felt like I had a good upbringing, the fact that my dad at dinner would always say 3 positive and 3 negatives. So I felt like I got that true constructive criticism. Like I heard something that I needed to work on. So I try and use that because I felt like it helped me along my path, that I use that with my daughters to say, okay, this is what I thought, you did really well. And this is where I think you can improve. And sometimes it is attitude. Like you had a great game, but your attitude wasn't right where it should have been. You weren't really speaking to your teammates correctly. Like, it's all encompassing, just not necessarily the play in the field. Because a lot of times kids think if I score a goal or I, keep a goal from going in the back of the net, like I played well. But like just allowing them, like it's the full 90, it's the full game, and how they are. But I try not to have any
try not to do that. I love the story in the book about your dad. I think you made a buzzer beater, and your dad like called out to the ref that your foot was on the line, you were out of bounds. I loved that story.
Oh yeah, because in middle school, 8th grade, competing against my dad. He's the coach of the other team. And to me, I put in a perfect layup. It was all fine. He screamed out to the ref, and the basket was taken away. His team won. So let me say the house was not thrilled that night at dinner. But again, it just showed me that even though it was his daughter, he respected the game, and he had a job to do, and he's trained these girls each and every day. So after a while, and after the tears and not appreciating my dad at that moment, I really did get the big picture later.
Dad, he had those lessons for you even when you weren't ready for them. That's awesome. And just kind of this last question I really want to get in there is, what advice do you have for athletes? I mean, because a lot of people, a lot of young girls especially not everyone's going to be on the U.S. women's national team, USA basketball, this or that. And it's hard to leave sport because that's something that is such a huge part of you. Right. What advice do you have for young athletes, especially that play their last game and think, now what?
I think along the way, I would try to convince them to have an identity outside of sport and have that balance, so that when it is over, whether it's high school, college, pro, that you can be somebody outside of it. And what is your relationship, whether you could be playing, or is your relationship now watching and supporting? But just overall, knowing that one day it is going to end, and just to be prepared for that. And I think sports gives us a good outlet in the fact that you can build so many relationships. You learn, how to win, how to lose, how to respect each other. Just that understanding of how to be a good teammate and how to make those around you better. I think if you can understand that, it's just not always about you. It's not about it's about the we and how to embrace every opportunity and grow.
The we, not me, right? I love that. All right, so we're gonna kick things up a little bit with some rapid fire questions. These are tough hitting, really tough here that, hopefully you're prepared for. All right, ready? Childhood nickname.
Pixie.
Oh, okay. I need this. Okay. I'm gonna need this. Yeah, no, I need the story for that. What is for dinner tonight?
Spaghetti and meatballs.
Okay. Red sauce.
Red sauce.
Coming for dinner.
Coming for dinner. It's a busy mom.
Polka dots or stripes?
Stripes.
I was gonna say. The best advice you have ever received?
Be comfortable with the uncomfortable.
Love that. Your favorite athlete to watch?
Favorite athlete to watch right now, Rose Lavelle.
Ooh, I'm excited to see her play over there. That's coming up. And what challenges you?
What challenges me? I guess my children. Children challenge me to be the best I can be for them.
That's a good one. Those were tough questions. I think that your experience at the high level prepared you for all of those.
Yeah.
So that was really fun. And I think at this point we're gonna try to move into some questions from our audience. There's some people listening. So let's discuss. People, if you want to unmute yourselves. I know we probably got some moms or parents in here. So does anyone have a question?
Christie, curious about on the winning teams, especially the women's national team, curious about how communication kind of happened, right? I think, when you're playing at that level, it's pretty open and constant and honest. But just curious, if you took the same communication lessons from the winning teams down to your daughters. I'm just curious about your thoughts on communication in terms of how you can do it, because I think I'm really honest about how I communicate, and I think that's key. But I don't have kids, but I have a husband, and apparently that doesn't always fly. So I have to kind of watch my tone and whatnot. Even if I'm calm, sometimes it doesn't hit right. So I'm just curious about how do you find communication to be most effective?
What you say has to be heard from the other person, and if they're not hearing it the way that you're saying it, you have to change your style or change your approach. And tone is key, timing is key. I learned a lot through playing at the highest level. Some people like to be approached individually, some would rather be in a group setting. And so knowing each individual personality and how they obtain communication better, and that's, I think, a huge part of success within a team. And that's why I tried to bring that down to my youth athletes, because communication, unfortunately, lacks, especially in females. They're so afraid to use their voice because they're afraid to be wrong. And I'm saying, and in sports, I learned this from Pia, that a lot of our meetings were open-ended and they never had closure to it. It was just about us expressing our feelings and communicating and talking so we could learn how we each saw the game. Because sports is in the eye of the beholder. As I was saying, we may see it differently and even one situation or scenario, and the more you can communicate through that, you can better understand how you're feeling in that situation, whether you're under some pressure and you didn't see it the same. So just being open-minded when you communicate. And I know as a coach, I have to change the way I communicate with certain players. If I say something once or twice and it's not heard, then I have to change my approach to help them better understand what I'm trying to get across.
That's a very good answer. It looks like we have somebody else that has a question in here. I think there's...
So this is probably a different question than what you're used to, but I work with an organization that specifically tries to increase visibility of soccer for women over 30. So we have players all the way through age 80. And what I find interesting is throughout all the markets of recreational women's soccer across the United States, we have very few former professional players playing recreationally with us. And again, looking at ages 30 through 55, 60, there are enough women out there who would have been part, whether it's semi-pro or pro or national. Is there anything that you can help me with as far as perspective on either, choosing to reach out to them more specifically and opening up that market? Or do you feel like once you've been a pro player, it's just not possible to step back in the game as a player, that you're either a coach or staff or, some other role, but stepping back in on a more casual level just isn't realistic anymore?
I think it depends on how long you play, because to be honest, my body cannot play soccer anymore. My knees are shot. But however, I think if you reach out to the club teams in your area, the pro teams, and then some of the college teams in your area, and let them know that it's actually an opportunity for them to continue to play, because a lot of players don't realize there's these leagues out there. And then just informing them and keeping them up to date on when the games can be. It's later at night, so it's easier to make things. I know the women's leagues around here are indoor and they're later at night, so that moms and females can actually go out and enjoy themselves and play soccer and kick the ball around and continue to enjoy the sport they love. But I think it's more awareness. I don't think a lot of players realize that there's these leagues out there that they continue to play in.
And you're a good example of why we want to start walking soccer.
Yeah.
It's big in the UK and some other parts of the world. And out here, we have women in their 60s and 70s thinking I don't need to walk. I can run. I'm fine. But my example has been what we've seen in Europe, that especially with men's former professional players, that their bodies just can't handle the running, the headache, some of the more intense interaction. And so I'm working on bringing that to the States, and hopefully that'll help that middle ground of people who've had to step away from full soccer, but still be able to get out there. So thank you for that response. I appreciate it.
Well done.
And I think we have a question in the chat from Marla Lamont, and she wants to know how you are keeping your kids motivated during COVID.
Keeping everything positive, to be honest. We talk about word washing a lot, because a lot of it is I can't, and I make sure they say I can. And, it's tough. And just being realistic, saying these aren't great times right now, but we have to make the most of it and be positive and, try to motivate them to continue to play soccer, to go exercise, because that's the hardest part, especially in youth athletes. They've been in a structured environment. I grew up in the time of free play where you just would go out with your friends and play, and these kids are so used to being told what to do. So it's just trying to encourage them to go play with the friends outside, go to the park, have fun, but stay in their small groups, because unfortunately, obviously, you can't be in these large groups during the pandemic, but they're with their same circle of friends, that they're able to go outside and just be active. you know, because there's so much for the mental side of youth players that, yeah, just everything as positive as can be.
Be active is so important. I literally went out like a few months ago and was trying to like play basketball and show up my little cousin, sprained my ankle just like on the sidewalk. Like thought that I was going back to the last question. I thought that I was something that I was really that I was not. So that's a good one. I think we have a question from maybe some of the young girls. Is anyone in here with a question? If we have possibly Harper is available.
Hi.
Hi.
Not do you have?
I don't think I have any questions.
We talked about a lot.
But I will say she kept looking at me at some of the things you were saying, specifically the ride home, that I am going to try to do better with.
You can work together. That's the whole idea.
That's right.
Like the communication of when you're coming home from your softball games, working with mom, maybe educating mom on like what you're working on or what the game plan was, and you know, some of the good takeaways that you have from the game, so you can help her understand the game a little bit more from your perspective.
Yep.
I think Harper's look said it all. I think I think the young kids gotta tell parents how it is. And
yep.
So looks like the parents learned a bit today too. We have another question, I think, from Nina. Thank you, Harper. That was awesome. Nina.
Christie, I have a question, and it's really around how you prevent yourself from pushing your own success and your own drive and your own commitment onto your children and allow them to create their own story and have their own space. And I ask it beyond the question of sport, but also with the homeschooling situation and the situation where you find yourself that you're good at math, for example, and you're trying to not project when somebody else isn't so good at math or they're having some difficulty. How do you manage that whole process, especially coming from such a high level that you came from?
Yeah, it's just being able to understand that you're trying to see it through your children's lens. And the fact is that your interest or your relationship with sport or school could be very different. And just having that communication with your child. In the same way, it's like in the very beginning, I'm the parent that wanted to finish the puzzle for my kid and she couldn't figure it out. And it's realizing that their path may be a little bit slower or their learning style is a little bit different. And it challenges you as a parent, but it's also like fun to realize, like, how can I get the best out of my child? Like, how can I help them be better in math or sports? And, you know, most of my children have learning disabilities. So I have to approach schoolwork a little differently, especially virtually. So sometimes we're mapping things and I write things in a circle so they can remember it versus like coming down straight in lines. And, you know, it takes a little bit more time with math as well. But just understanding patience and your values together, I think will help in the long run, because you don't want it to become turmoil and frustrated and screaming and yelling at each other because your alignment isn't connected. So just understanding their way of learning is very different than yours. And, you know, I'm putting into perspective, because it's the same thing in sports. What we see, sometimes our child can't really see in the moment, and being able to understand that and adjust your level of teaching. And that's what I'm doing as a coach. Also, is like, you know, one of the things I would say is like, even in sports, is not coaching on the ball, because the child needs to be able to digest, make decisions, make choices. And if I'm constantly feeding them to them, they're never going to be able to do it on their own. And it's the same thing with school. It's very challenging, right? Being a mom right now is tough work. Being a sports parent is tough work, but just digesting and knowing you're doing the right thing, you know, and understanding, like, sometimes we take those moments where we have to step away, you know, from the table when your child is, you know, when you feel yourself and that energy getting crazy. I think that's the time to just kind of remove yourself in a nice way, take a deep breath and realize, like, you're here to help and support your child versus pushing, you know, your interests and trying to hopefully make them who you are. And it's really like, let them write their own script. But those moments you can step away, take a deep breath, it usually helps you in the long run.
Thank you. That's great advice. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Nina. And before we kind of sign off here, I'd love if people could put in the chat where you are tuning in from. Just love to kind of know where in the world people are, because over here on the East Coast, it's it's just interesting. We got a lot of Nashville, Nashville in the area, Florida, LA, Jersey, Dirty Jersey. Let's go. That's awesome. Christie, thank you so much for such a great discussion. You're obviously an inspiration to young girls, but to women everywhere. So I really appreciate you joining us today. Your integrity is obviously something we could all learn from. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Kelsey. Appreciate it for having me.
And thank you, Play Like a Girl, and Dr. Kim, and everyone for having me.